Hi everyone. First of all, when I'm in these settings, I always like to check how many customers do we have in the room? How many people use SAP Ariba? That's great. Hand down. Those that don't use SAP Ariba, hand up. Okay, great. Says something about it. Well, no, it's not. Why not? But, so that says that we have a lot of customers here. That's great. What we also have is we have 100% of companies in this room who can do something about the topic I'm about to talk about. Some of this is about technology, but some of this is just, things that you can do tomorrow. And I'll give you, at the end of this, a few notes about this. So again, my name is Henrik Smedberg. As you can tell, from my accent, I'm based here in Sydney. Okay, then. Good try. It's my 7th country I live in. I've lived here for a year now. I started out in Sweden. So if you want ABBA tunes, I can sing some in the break after. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about and that I really think is something that we should all embrace and think about in our daily lives in procurement. I've had the pleasure to be working in the US, Africa, Middle East, Europe, and now here. And one thing that is true is that in procurement, we hold the money, right? It's like some bank robber said, why do you go to the bank to rob the banks? Well, they have the money. Well, good news in procurement is that we have the money and we can do something about it. This presentation is really about doing something good with your money and thinking about how do we spend it so that it benefits us as employees, our customers, our investors, and all the partners that we have around our business. So that's the topic we want to talk about. Now, 30 years ago or so, when I was a child, this was something that I would, if I would go to the supermarket with my parents, I would say, Mom, can we buy one of those? Look at that front of that package. That looks really exciting. And it even says it. It's great. Does anyone else recognize this packaging? Okay, so some in the same age as me. It's a lot of sugar in this. My mom always said no, but I always said yes. Let's buy it. Now, if we move a couple of years ahead, this is Louis. He's my son. He's 9 years old. And this is him at Kohl's the other day. And when I was preparing for this presentation, I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. When I go to Kohl's or Woolies, for that matter, if you're from Woolies, I have to say both, since they're both customers. I think it's important to look at where is he looking. He's not looking at the front of the package. He's looking at the back of it. And he's the most critical shopper in our family. So it's always me and Louis going to buy food. And I try to buy lots of things, not the sugary stuff all the time. But I look at the front still and look at that organic. That's important to me. I know that's ticks in the box when I get home. But Louis, he looks at the back. It's pretty fascinating if you think about it. He's 9 years old. I certainly didn't teach him that, as you can understand. So he's looking at, is there palm oil? Is there citric acid in the product? And more often than not, he'll take the package and say, nope, it has the wrong ingredients. I put it back. It's pretty interesting. And I think that if we had more 9-year-olds in this room as we talk about this, we would maybe have a little bit of a different discussion. So let's think that Louis sits on this chair and he's going to look at us when we talk about this. Now, our generations, as you can see, we think about sustainability. We will recommend brands and products to our peers if we believe that those companies are doing the right thing. If we feel that we're doing something good when we're buying it, it probably means that the whole supply chain has done something good. So it doesn't just become the packaging. So this is one picture for you to remember. It's a pretty big issue we're talking about here. 5 trillion plastic straws are floating in our oceans. That's a T, not an M, trillion. That's a lot of plastic that comes into our lives later on in a different way. We also know that about 50% of the world's population live on a daily basis on less than $2. Can you imagine going one day when you get to spend $2? We get to live here in Australia, and it's such a privilege to live in this this country, for me as well, obviously, being fairly new to the country. But a lot of us don't think about the poverty that is out there. And 3 billion people lacking waste management as part of their daily lives. We can do something. We hold the money, remember? So we can do something about changing some of these things. A couple of other numbers for you. 48 million people. And almost anywhere you look, you'll find slaves. Right? 48 million, more than 48 million people globally are in situations of slavery. And what about this one? 200 million people are estimated to have an effect from climate change. The other week, I read about the storm going over Hawaii. One island just disappeared. Did you guys read that? It's astonishing. So Mother Nature is obviously saying, okay, enough. We have to do something about this. And I think if we look at those things, tsunamis becoming more frequent, there is obviously hurricanes being more frequent. Lots of these things are changing our lives. But there's hope. Here's a number for you guys. So this doesn't happen in Australia, right? There's no slavery in Australia. Clearly, we're a country where we've moved beyond that, right? We don't think this is a problem here. Well, we think, and this is obviously an estimate, but if you look at it, there are fruit pickers that come in, backpackers, and there are lots of Swedish guys, by the way, that come here backpacking. It used to be for the tennis. We're not so good at tennis anymore, so now we're just picking mangoes. But joking aside, we have a lot of people coming into our supply chain doing things. And when I go to do my shopping, I don't think about who actually picked the mango, but clearly someone did. Are those people being treated in the right way? That's just one simple example. If you look at fisheries and others, you see even more of it. Good news is that someone is doing something about it. The government here in New South Wales obviously sent out legislation, and everyone has to do something about it. I think it's a brilliant thing, because now we don't just have to look at our first line of supplier. We have to look at our supplier, supplier, supplier. What does that mean? That means that we have to get the new currency right. The new currency that is the best currency is data. And we talked a lot about that today. It's really interesting to see what people are doing about it and taking action on that data. So let's hold that thought for a second. 3 C's that I've talked to procurement about for about 20 years. Cost, control, and compliance. These are fundamental C's in terms of how we run our businesses. Does everyone agree that those 3 C's are really important in terms of how we run our businesses? I assume that's a yes. I still think they're very valid. However, when we look today, the board-level discussions clearly think that these are kind of under the surface. They should happen. The first 3 C's should be there. Cost control and compliance will always be important. However, new things, connectivity, how do we make sure that we talk to our suppliers and find out more about them? Having a mission of change in our organizations to drive something better, and then conscience, which I think is obviously driving this discussion on purpose. The board wants and needs to understand this. Legislation, yes. But who likes to have their name on the front of the paper? No one. Well, unless you're a psychopath, I guess that maybe changes the game. But I think it's really important to look at these things. So at the top, you see, obviously, there's fear about risk avoidance. We want to make sure that we do a good due diligence on our suppliers and on our supply chains. But I also think there's a positive discussion on goals that we can do. What are we doing in terms of getting to a better situation for us? It pays off, by the way. Research says that if you actually care about purpose and if you do something actively about it, you have about a 3x in terms of outperformance of your competitors. So doing good actually results in good results as well. From an employee perspective, and I take this to heart in my own organization, there's about 30% reduction in your average turnover of your staff if you actually do something good. So which means people really care about this stuff. So in my team, we will go out to communities. We built bikes for children in one area that they couldn't get a bike. And we went there and built the bikes and gave it to the bikes. It was, I was in tears when the kids came in. Obviously, my staff didn't know about it. But then at the end of the day, they thought they were going racing on these kids' bikes. And then we have these children come in and we give them their bikes. It was like one of the best days this year for me. So awesome. And then you get the pictures later on with the kids running around on the bikes. It's like, I don't know, it makes me feel great. It's something that is, tangible. And I think we have to think about it. It starts with me, right? What can I do? What can I do about this? Because it's all about, if you say, well, we should, or, this is important to us. Well, is it? It only really gets important to do something about it if it starts with me. And it starts with you, and you, and you. So what can we do? Now, finance communities are also interested in this. If you look at BlackRock, when they do their investments, they don't invest anymore in startups that don't have a purpose as part of their brand. Pretty interesting, right? These guys are sharks, right? They will want to, dolphins as someone called them. It's Flipper, right? They buy something and sell it again. I think it's really important to let these numbers sink in. There are lots of companies doing great things about this already. These are the three areas that we see most companies focusing on, depending on where they are. Social, environmental, and economic. If you look at someone like Fortescue Metal Group out in Perth, they've really led the way, and they were one of the pioneers when we started really putting an emphasis on this as well. And I think that's someone to look up to in terms of an organization who's really taking it in their own hands, both to work with indigenous suppliers and have metrics that says, let's do the right thing and help communities grow, do the right thing. And also, obviously, looking at their supply chain. Scoring suppliers, yes, we should do it, but we should invite them. We should make sure that the connectivity is there in understanding, one, their innovation, what they have, but also the good things they're doing. A lot of times we get back to the 3 C's again, cost control and compliance, and we hammer people on that, but we don't think about that conscience message enough and take time to evaluate it, because it's actually pretty hard, right? It's one thing what I tell you that I'm doing, but you also have to come and see if I'm doing it. And I think that as a community of procurement professionals, we can do something about that if we actually pull together. So, of course, I'm not going to talk about solutions, but clearly there are ways to solve these things. The Reba Network, just to give you some stats, and this is really the connectivity between enterprises, 3.6 million companies on it. In terms of what does this mean? Well, the purchasing power here is $2.3 trillion US dollars. That's a big number. What does that mean? Well, it's what you turn over in Amazon, Alibaba, and eBay times 2. That says something about it. It's a little bit like the truck before. At least gives you something. And it's the same as the GDP of Australia and New Zealand combined. So it's a big number, right? We can do something good with that in the connectivity space. So, call to action. I think it starts with you guys. It starts with something that you can take home and do something about. We can choose to have different words for this. I certainly like the procurement with purpose messaging because it fits nicely. Conscience is sometimes a little bit tough. I like it because it's a little bit more pointy. So depending on how you like to use your C's, think about that. But of course, number one, talk to your internal stakeholders. What are we doing? How are we going about this in a way that actually our brand gets lifted up in terms of the good things that we do? Connect with your suppliers. They have good ideas. And I think it's really interesting to see what they can come and help you with. And then go in and look at these risk areas that you have. Most organizations that I worked with globally have a fairly good grasp of the situation when it comes to their first line of supplier. But what happens in the second line and the third? What happens if someone in the second line of supply outsources that and it turns out there is child labor in that process? Well, most likely you, as the big brand, will be the one in the paper. We don't want that. But it means that we have to go down the chain to find things out. How do we do that? It's really difficult because most organizations, when I have this discussion with them, they say, well, we have all this data coming at us, and we don't really know what to do with it. They won't say that first, but after you dig a little bit, they're like, well, I have all these feeds coming in. What do we do about it? Well, okay, let's get a dashboard. That's a good idea. Let's get a dashboard, okay? So we get a dashboard. But then the biggest problem is there's no one in the chair to do something about it. So I think one thing to think about in your organization when you get home, is there someone in that chair? Is it an empty chair that you ask someone to sit and look at dashboards, or do you empower that person to also take action and do something about it? Because that's really when the rubber meets the road. And that's where it gets really interesting. And then, of course, continuously measure the suppliers on what they said they would do. And I think there are lots of good power. So for me, personally, the reason I think this is important is going back to Louis. Right? When he grows up, he will continue to look at backup packages, which, this is actually a funny story. I was laughing because, I'm from Sweden. And he says, oh, we have to go and buy these Vegemite chips. And I was like, really? Okay, we've been here long enough. That's awesome. You're getting into it. True story, though. I mean, so he looks really happy here, right? And I want to make sure that, all of the children of that generation get to be happy. Funny backside of this story. What do you think happened 2 seconds after I took this photo? Looked at the back. Sure enough, citric acid. He was so excited about buying this. I mean, he wanted to go. That day, he was like, let's go buy this. I just tried it. This is awesome. Puts it back, and we walk out the store. So keep in mind how important that is. He was so excited about it. But he'll put it back like there was nothing else, right? And he said, it doesn't matter. They taste great, but, it doesn't have the right ingredients for me. It baffles me. Thank you very much for listening. Let's do something about this.